Dr. Pam Rajput, the extremely distinguished ladies on the dais, and the even more distinguished ladies and gentlemen who women who are a part of this high-level National Consultation on the status of women, of which women in media is a subcomponent, if I understand the drift of the session appropriately. Dr. Pam Rajput and go a fairly long way back in life. She was a colleague of my late father at the Punjab University, Chandigarh, friends with my mother, and of course has been a witness to the very rowdy upbringing which I have had. But be that as it may, when she invited me to be a part of this session, obviously, for reasons of propriety, I could not say no, but more importantly, I think it is very important that we try and acquaint ourselves firsthand with what really has been or what really are the issues which have been agitating the minds of women journalists, people who are in the public space, and what steps do they think are appropriate or required to be able to surmount some of the specific issues which need to be addressed. I thank Dr. Rajput for having led me through the entire drift of the discussion, and as she said that what she articulated was fresh from the oven, I'm sure that we also would not only take it with the seriousness it deserves, but try and see that whatever is possible in the interim, while you finalize your recommendations, we could possibly act upon. Before I launch into my limited understanding of the media space as I see it, I would like to request this august house that if you have between 3 or 5 recommendations which you think are doable in the short term, and since issues pertaining to women I don't think will get constrained by the model code of conduct kicking in, so therefore even if we give ourselves the next 60 or 75 days, let me see as to out of those 5, how many are we able to implement. So if we can have a set of 3 to 5 recommendations which you think are doable given the time constraint, we would definitely like to see as to how we can address them. With regard to the last issue that you flagged, the Women's Reservation Bill, as you are aware, it's been passed in the Raj Sabha. We've been trying to build a consensus on it in the Lok Sabha. Yes, there is resistance, which all of you are aware of. But as I understand from the discussions which we've had in the Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs, that government is committed to putting it onto the table of the Lok Sabha in this very last session of the 15th Lok Sabha. So, therefore, that is insofar as the women's reservation is concerned. About women in media, well, a large number of practitioners in this room possibly understand the media space much better than I do. But if we were to segment it, if we were to look at media in terms of 3 verticals, the print, the electronic and the new media, I think each of them has its own very peculiar and unique characteristics. And then we could possibly try and see if we can superimpose a common narrative in terms of action points which run through all three of them, which can really help to address some of the issues which have been raised. The advantage with print media is that you have the time for reflection between what you assimilate and ultimately what is reported. And I think that time of reflection gives everybody a chance to possibly insert an element of sensitivity where an element of sensitivity is required. And so therefore you would find that reportage in the print media with regard to sensitive issues is at times far more nuanced, far more balanced, and far more sensitive, to say the least. The difficulty with the print, with the electronic media, is of a different nature altogether. I have articulated this earlier, and I have no hesitation in saying it, though it's my personal view, that possibly the liberalization of the electronic media space and the manner in which it has happened is possibly one of the most corrosive legacies of economic liberalization. And the reason why I say that, and I say that with a full sense of responsibility, is because what I could understand as a lawyer when I came to this job was that possibly this was the only sector where a legal or a regulatory framework had succeeded the opening up of the sector rather than preceded it. So therefore, what you have in the electronic media space, and since for 5 years I had the opportunity of interacting with the front end of the media, and over the last 1.5 years an opportunity to look at the back end of the media, and I can say that the first interaction was absolutely a pleasure, and that's not to say that the second is a nightmare, but be that as it may. The fact is that you have close to 798 television channels as we speak. Out of those 798 television channels, there are 415 news and current affairs channels. And news and current affairs occupies only 7% of the media space, which is made up of about 15.5 crore households, television households, at the last count. The entire revenue model of the electronic media is completely driven by advertising. The entire effort at digitization was an attempt also to correct this skew in order to bring about a situation whereby subscriber revenues also start kicking in. But that's a process which is taking time. We've gone through phase 1, we've gone through phase 2, but as we go into phase 3 and phase 4, there are certain lessons to be learned of phase 1 and phase 2, which we are trying to incorporate in phase 3 and phase 4. So therefore, as we speak, it is the entire television industry remains dependent for its revenue model on advertising revenues. And advertising revenues are measured, with all due respects, because the matter is sub judice and is under adjudication as we speak, by a very flawed instrument, or by a very flawed currency called the television rating points. And the unfortunate specter of television rating points is that it's a monopoly market. And a monopoly market which unfortunately is not representative of the demographic reality of India. You have 11,805 people meters, which of course is also subject to being verified, which measure the audience preferences of about 70 crore people across this country. And that TRP benchmark really drives the entire advertising revenue towards A particular channel or B particular channel. And therefore, you have this mad race of sensationalism, trying to put out content which is unverified, which is at times conjecture, which definitely is sensational, in order to see as to how you can measure up higher on that TRP paradigm. And if I am not mistaken, that the incentives and some of the other financial prerequisites of people in the television industry are also linked to as to how the company really performs on the TRP barometer. So therefore, you have a fundamental structural flaw, which then allows deliberately and at times inadvertently a lot of content to slip through. Primarily because the emphasis is not on sensitivity. The emphasis is not on nuanced treatment. The emphasis is on sensationalism and as to how that can generate TRPs, which generates more advertising revenues, which means healthier bottom lines and which means happier shareholders. So, and in order to correct this fundamental flaw, for the first time, the government has attempted to seize the bull by the horns, and we have put in place a regulatory framework as to how the television audience measurement in this country needs to be done. And if this initiative, with the support of all of you, actually sees the light of the day, because in private, every news broadcaster, every person who runs a free-to-air channel, almost every editor, without exception, has come and told me that, this is an excellent initiative, but we can only say it in private. We will not be able to say that in public, but be that as it may, it doesn't change anything. But if we are able to see this through, you will find that in the months and the years to come, it will take some time, but in the months and years to come, you will find a far more sober discourse, maybe even a serious discourse in the media space, which would then take care of some of the insensitivity which all of you would have reflected upon during your deliberations.